From the moment Custer enters Lakota territory, he realizes he's facing an enemy like no other.
Close your eyes for a moment. You're 22 years old, standing on the grassy hills of Montana in June 1876. The air is thick with gun smoke. Your carbine jams in your hands, arrows hiss past your ears. At your sides, friends you laughed with at campfires just hours earlier are falling one by one. In your front, a fallen soldier, and counting not 2, not 10, but 26 arrows piercing his body. You know you will not survive. The only thing you leave behind is your pocket watch, or the boot torn from your foot, or the buttons from your uniform. These are the relics that still whisper from the battlefield. And when we listen, they tell a story the history books never dared to write. Are you ready to hear it? But before we continue, let me know where you're watching from, and if a family story or memory ties you to this era, share it in the comments. And to make sure these stories never fade, subscribe and join me here on EyeRich History to watch more interesting history videos like this. Amid the rolling hills of Montana rests a tale of courage, tragedy, and resilience. A story not only told through words, but through the silent relics left behind. These artifacts, uncovered over the years, provide a rare window into the lives of the men and women who shaped one of the most infamous battles in American history. The Battle of the Little Bighorn. When the dust settled on June 26, 1876, the ground was littered with the remnants of desperate combat. Weapons, personal belongings, and even the bodies of horses and men lay exposed to the unforgiving environment whims, each carrying its own silent testimony of that fateful day. These relics are far more than simple objects. Consider, for example, a Colt 1860 model revolver discovered decades later, half buried along a riverbank. Its placement suggests it may have been dropped by a Sioux or Cheyenne warrior in the frenzy of combat. At the time, these tribes fought with a mix of traditional weapons and firearms taken from soldiers, blending age-old ways with modern technology in a fight for survival. Another example is a Springfield trapdoor carbine, the standard issue of the U.S. cavalry. Taken from a fallen trooper, it remained in the possession of a Sioux family for generations before resurfacing in the 1950s. Such artifacts remind us that these weapons carried not just military value but cultural and emotional weight, often transforming into heirlooms passed reverently through native families. Yet not all relics were instruments of war. A lone boot abandoned on the prairie stands as a haunting reminder of the humanity behind the uniforms. Most of these troopers were young men, many barely in their 20s. Their personal belongings, penknives, pocket watches, combs, speak to the lives they had once known and the futures they never reached. Though ordinary, these small items are among the battlefield's most poignant discoveries. They conjure images of camaraderie, of men gathered around campfires sharing stories of home, and of hopes to return to lives cut short by tragedy. On the other side, Native American warriors left their own powerful imprint. 26 arrows retrieved from a single fallen soldier embody the fierce resistance of the Sioux and Cheyenne. Their skill with bow and arrow, honed across generations, proved devastating against an unprepared cavalry. Captured rifles, such as another Springfield carbine, represented more than just spoils of war. To native warriors, these weapons symbolized adaptation and empowerment, the ability to wield the enemy's own technology in defense of their land and way of life. The cavalry's dependence on horses was both its greatest asset and deepest vulnerability. These loyal animals carried men into combat, hauled supplies, and bore the brunt of the fighting. The skeletal remains scattered across the battlefield testify to their sacrifice, silent witnesses to chaos and bloodshed. Later, fragments of leather tack, horseshoes, and saddles were uncovered, each a fragment of a story belonging to mounts that never returned. These remains remind us that the cost of the battle extended beyond human lives. In the years after the conflict, the Little Bighorn battlefield became a kind of open-air museum, though one too often plundered. Visitors and treasure seekers carried off countless relics, stripping the land of many of its tangible connections to history. Still, some artifacts stayed hidden beneath the soil, waiting for their stories to be unearthed. An 1877 photograph, taken just a year after the battle, shows the earliest efforts to mark where troopers had fallen. Wooden stakes in the image served as precursors to the permanent markers later placed, ensuring that the dead would not be forgotten. In the decades that followed, archaeologists and historians pieced together more of the puzzle. Bullets, uniform buttons, knives, and other items emerged, providing fresh insight into the intensity of the struggle and the personal realities faced by those who fought. Today, many of these relics are safeguarded in museums, preserved both as educational resources and as memorials. They remind us of the layered complexities of history and of the immense sacrifices made by both sides in this iconic clash. So, as we leave the rolling hills of Montana behind, we're left with more than the echoes of gunfire. We're left with the voices of relics that refuse to be silent. Hundreds of men fell in under an hour, but their story lingers not in glory or defeat, but in a boot, a watch, an arrow, a horse's skeleton. These fragments are the true witnesses, reminding us that history is written as much by what survives in the soil as by what survives in textbooks. But here's the tragedy. What if the relics contradict the very legends we were raised to believe? What if they reveal not a heroic last stand, but a preventable disaster, a clash fueled by arrogance and miscalculation? Was Custer's last stand really an act of doomed valor, or the result of reckless ambition that condemned his men to die? The relics whisper one version of truth, historians argue another, and that tension is where history lives. The question now is, whose truth do we choose to remember? You've seen what the relics revealed beneath the battlefield. Now, keep the history alive. Like, share, and subscribe, so more people will know what's hidden behind the battlefield of the Little Bighorn. Thanks for watching.